Kyler Staley, how are you, sir?
I'm doing good. It's good to be back. Hope you guys are doing well.
Uh, just like, man, if I was any better, I'd be Dustin.
Florida.
Well, there's that. But plenty to talk about basketball wise. You've got Hoosier Hysteria tomorrow night. You've got a piece out on Tamar Bates. I know Alec has a piece out on Tamar Bates. And Cincinnati officially hires Mark Adams, or Drew Adams. He is the son of Mark. Earlier I said brothers, but Mark is Drew's father. But as an associate AD of basketball, what position does he have there?
I mean, the way I look at it is more of kind of like an assistant AD position. You see a lot of those like at the high school level and things like that.
This was kind of like a Thad Matta situation, I'm thinking.
Yeah, I actually think it is. You could see him kind of on the bench, kind of in the role that Thad Matta was in. But
the reason I'm saying is because I think IU was just being kind to Thad, and maybe thinking, that, hey, maybe this could help Woody as well. Because I don't think that was Woody's idea. I don't think that Dane was Woody's idea because he didn't make those hires. And but anyway, my point being, they just wanted Cincinnati just wanted to get Mark Adams in a position on the basketball staff of any kind because it brings, allegedly, it's going to bring a great treasure with it.
Yep. So obviously that treasure is Flory Badunga, the 2024 phenom big man. So if people aren't aware, Mark Adams was or is the Indiana Elite Director, which Flory Badunga does play for them, and he was also the coach for Flory Badunga this year. So, at the start when Flory came in, there was always that Adams connection there. Drew comes from Bradley. There was talk Flory Badunga is going to Bradley. But, as Adams has kind of moved around, he's moved to Cincinnati now. I mean, I would say probably right now it's about a 75% chance you're going to see Flory Badunga. As a Cincinnati Bearcat. I mean, Wes Miller's done a fantastic job recruiting wise. He's got Griffith coming in. He's got Edrin James' son just committed a couple days ago there.
Jizzy, you got to say Jizzy James.
Is it Jizzy or is it Jizzle?
Oh, it's Jizzle James. That's right. Jizzle James. Yeah. I can't. Jizzy James. It used to be my favorite rap artist. I forgot. Jizzle James.
I think that's before my time.
He's made up. Oh. That's my rap name.
Okay.
My first name is James. So there you go.
I'm gonna start on you. So anyway, yeah. So yeah, Flory Badunga. I mean, it's seemingly right now a lock. Not to say that Indiana and other schools aren't going to stay active. Obviously Flory Badunga is coming into Hoosier Hysteria tomorrow on an unofficial visit. He'll be part of that loaded group of kids that Indiana's recruiting that's going to be there. But, as of right now
give us a quick list of that.
Yeah. So you've got guys like Trent Sisley, like I mentioned, Flory Badunga, Riley Burgess, who's been on a few visits to Indiana so far, Trey McKinney, 2025 guard, EJ Walker, Caleb Williams, who's actually going to be there for a official visit. I think he's the only one out of that group that's there for official. And then Jonathan Powell was a recent name. He's going to be there for a visit. He plays with Gabe Cupps at Centerville. And then speaking of Gabe Cupps, him and Ja'Kai Newton, the two 2023s for IU, they're going to be there as well. There might be a few more names that I'm missing, but I mean, just reading off those kids' names, I mean, that's a list right there.
That's eight. I've never, that's on the higher side that I can recall. No Jalen Harrelson. He spent a lot of time at Indiana already, but
yeah, he's actually at a USA team camp. And I think Denver, I think that's where it's at. So, unfortunately the times just kind of mixed in, but obviously he's got to go do what he needs to do out there. I mean, that's a big honor for him to be one of the few 2025s that's going to be participating in that camp.
Tamar Bates, you have a piece out right now about him, and he is a question for all of us. Alex got a piece out as well. And that basically comes down to, is he not the missing link, but a missing link for this Indiana team? Is his improvement? Is this going to be there? What improvement? How much improvement? How is that going to play out in all of that? But Tamar Bates is one of those guys that much is expected. There's improvement from him expected. The expectations on him are probably, I'd say, as high as anybody on that team coming back for growth.
Yes, I agree with that. He's definitely an important piece to Indiana's roster this year. Last year, very inconsistent. Started off the season very well. I think he's the first 10 games, maybe averaged 11 points, and that dropped down to only 3 points per game. But he's a guy that's put in a lot of work this summer. He's really improved his body. I mean, he looks like a completely different, from a physical standpoint, just looks like a completely different player than he did last year. I expect him to come off the bench this year, kind of rotating between that 2 and 3 spot. Obviously, I think Jalen Hood-Schifino will be he'll be starting alongside Xavier Johnson, but Tamar Bates will be probably one of the first off the bench. I mean, you got to expect a lot of consistency from him. I think he's got to really be that outside shooter, one of them at least for them. He's a spot up shooter. He's a catch and shoot shooter. Like he can make plays. I mean, there's a lot of things that Tamar Bates can do, and he was a big recruiting win last year for Indiana. And I think this year it's all about consistency from him.
And heading into this season, I mean, Mike Woodson said he'd like to think that Tamar could be that breakout player for Indiana this year. And one of the things I think that over the past several seasons, Indiana fans have been looking for is development in the offseason. It seems like players that get on campus when they're a freshman, they're the same player when they're a junior or a senior. Do you think that this has potential to a player like Tamar Bates, who had his ups and downs, was inconsistent? You're looking for more consistency. You're looking for better shooting. I mean, is this going to be a sign that this staff can develop some of these players that they're recruiting?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they expected a lot of things from Tamar last year, but I mean, there were some off the court things that kind of came up in Tamar's life where, I think that kind of played onto his on court situation. But, this year, especially if Tamar, if he has development this year, because he was really the first big recruiting win for Woodson. So he's kind of, that sample size, I guess, when you're looking at that,
Sure.
would you best. So, I mean, Tamar definitely fits that bill right there. I mean, if he can develop and he can be a guy that can be the top scorer off the bench, which I project him to be, that shows a lot for Indiana as far as recruiting, guys coming in, being developed and then being ready for that next level, that NBA level.
Yeah, he's a guy that I don't know, Mike Woodson has shown that he likes to stick with the starting lineup. I think that mostly all of us could pretty much pin that in already, exactly what that's going to be with Trace, Race, Miller Kopp, and Xavier and Jalen Hood-Schifino. Is it possible that Tamar could work himself into a starting position? I know that maybe that's not important because maybe it's important that he is the star coming off the bench leading a second unit this year that is more is expected of as well. You've also got Jordan Geronimo and the alleged improvement of Logan Duncombe, Malik Raynaud. We've heard great things of him, so we don't know that could be a very, very improved, should be second unit. But hopefully you're not sending a second unit. I don't like, you can't send in a unit. It's got to be mixed in.
Yeah, and to answer your question, can he become in the starting lineup? Absolutely. I think you look at two different spots where if there's signs of struggle, Miller Kopp, that's another guy that's, seemingly on a short leash when it comes to Indiana. I think, if Miller Kopp were to struggle the first half of the season, I think Tamar comes in and he takes that starting spot and Woodson rolls in with a 3-guard lineup. And then, if Jalen Hood-Schifino, which I don't think is going to happen, I know if he struggles at the Big Ten level, we'll see how he kind of develops going through the season. He's only a freshman, but he's also a 5-star freshman and he's very mature for his age and, the way he plays basketball. But I think that's two areas that you would watch for Tamar potentially starting. But, at the end of the day, not important. If he's starting, it's about whoever finishes the game. Tamar could be one of those guys that finishes the game this year.
And here's something that I think is going to be interesting in this season. I'd like to get your perspective, Kyler. I feel like Indiana has the depth where they can have their go-to starting lineup, but they can make adjustments as needed in terms of who their opponent is, who's playing well. They can ride the hot hand a little bit. Do you think Mike Woodson would be willing to mix up that starting lineup throughout the course of a season, depending on opponent, depending on how guys are playing? Or do you think he's going to stick with primarily a pet starting 5 or whatever you want to call it, a primary starting 5? What are your thoughts on that?
So Initially, I think Mike Woodson's going to stick with that starting five, what Jim just kind of named off with. Just from what I saw last year. Now, obviously, he had to adjust the starting five a few times this year for player expansion, or last year for player suspensions, things like that. But I also think Woodson's smart enough to know if Indiana's struggling, especially the first half of the season, and he feels like, the starting unit has to be adjusted. I mean, I think he will. But I think as of right now, I look at Woodson kind of sticking with that starting five of Cobb, Rayson Trays, Hutchefino, and Xavier Johnson to see how that works out. It all comes down to if Indiana's going to struggle. I mean, I don't project him to, but we'll just see with that. But Woodson, I think he'll do what's necessary, what's best for the team.
Yeah, I think that, and I've said this, Miller Kopp he's very relaxed. I think last year was a kind of a pressure situation for him. He was, I don't know. He's playing at Northwestern is not playing in Assembly Hall a lot. And when things weren't going well, I think he started pressing and it just didn't work. And I think part of that was the pressure of Indiana needing someone so badly to be a shooter, and it was not coming from anyone. I don't think that that's going to be a problem this year. I don't think that they need to rely or going to need to rely on the 3-point shot. And as long as you're just efficient, they're going to be fine. I think that will hopefully trickle down to Miller Kopp, maybe loosen him up a little bit. Maybe he can hit a few more shots, but maybe this offense is not built for his 3-point shooting. I don't know what it is. But if Tamar Bates comes in and starts hitting, I don't know. It's going to be hard to keep him out of the starting lineup. I know people say it doesn't matter who starts and who finishes, but it kind of does because that sets a tone on who your best players are and who you want on the floor most of the time.
Yeah, and talking with Miller Cobb, I expect a big change from last year with his game. Like you said, he does seem more relaxed, but he also seems a lot more confident. And Woodson's even kind of mentioned that, I mean, Miller Cobb, he's got a lot of pressure. He came in last season. He was supposed to be that outside shooter that Indiana desperately needed. Obviously didn't work out. It wasn't efficient enough. But I think this year, I mean, he's even talked about it. Miller Cobb's like, if I'm open, I'm not going to hesitate. I'm shooting the ball. That just shows his confidence right there. And he's also, kind of developed his body a little bit more. He's a little bit stronger. And what people kind of, overlook a little bit, he's a really good wing defender. He was, towards the end of the season, he was one of their best perimeter defenders, I thought, on the team. But as far as shooting this year, that's a big thing. He doesn't have as much pressure, I don't think, this year because of the guys that they brought in, and, the development of Xavier Johnson shooting from behind the arc. Jalen Hutchefino, he's very capable of shooting from behind the arc. Miller Kopp's I think he's going to play a lot looser this year, and I think he's going to be a lot more confident. I expect big things from Miller Kopp this year.